Thanks, Alex. Um, I think so far the government have been doing exactly the right thing and seem to have, Lord Frost, I think, has been doing a good job, and Prime Minister and his team, wider team, have the right approach. Obviously, we haven't yet got down to the final touches, and there are mines ahead which we need to avoid, and so the situation is a dangerous one. In that context, I think it's important to realise, and I agree with Martin's list of all the dangers. We have to avoid those, and it doesn't mean that there's a lot of work remaining to be done. But it's important to realise that the UK has massive leverage over the EU because of the fact that the EU hasn't, in fact, completed the project of integrating its sovereignty in the way it would like to portray it as having done in law. So the EU likes to behave for trade terms as one bloc. It likes to behave for monetary terms as the Eurozone, but for fiscal terms, it leaves sovereignty with the member states. And those propositions, at least two of the three, are incompatible with each other. I think actually all three are, in the following way. What the current legal architecture of the EU does is to split member state sovereignty over the currency between the federal Eurozone structures with the European Central Bank and the member states, which are the ones that deal with fiscal matters, i.e. Tax raising. They also, the member states, borrow money in the international financial markets to fund their operations. They do so on a solo basis. But unlike any normal sovereign, they aren't actually in law any more sovereign in this context, because the European Central Bank, which is controlled by a committee of the Eurozone member states, not by any one of them individually, is the only party that can print more money to repay debts in extremis if they run out of money. It's crucial in international regulation that a country, a sovereign country, is able to control its central bank and repay its debts using central bank printing presses. Why? Because a true sovereign need never go bust. The result of which is the true sovereign assets, that sovereign paper or debt, is the underpinning of the global financial system because it's risk-free, always can be relied upon, or it's treated as such. It's treated as worth its face value for collateral purposes, and it's treated as fully liquid because there are always people who want to get hold of it if you're holding it. So the financial institutions in the market use it liberally. Now in the EU law, in the Eurozone, there is no sovereign. In fact, all the money is being raised by sub-sovereign entities, rather like municipalities in the US system. Because in law, as I say, they no longer control the central bank. Now this feature, but the EU law denies that fact and treats member state debt as having a sovereign quality. Now what that means, that fiction means, is that the risk that arises from that debt, the true risk of default, the counterparty risk, if you're holding that paper, is very different from what EU law tells you it is. EU law allows all the financial institutions to treat it as risk-free, but the reality is, as we can see, it isn't. That's highly dangerous, and it basically pumps trillions of risk into the global financial market through the interconnectivities of all the financial institutions around the world at the risk of savers and investors. Now, the UK at the moment mitigates that risk within the EU structure by imposing additional capital charges on all financial institutions operating here, which is where most financial institutions in the European market operate from. They operate cross-border from London across the EU. After Brexit, after the year end, it will be no longer possible for the UK to play that mitigating role. And so there are two options in financial services for the EU. Either it can replicate this setup through a concept known as equivalence, but not in the way the EU is currently applying it, but by enhancing it so that the UK makes any laws and rules it wants so long as it complies with the global standards. And the EU then recognises the UK standards, and the UK financial institutions carrying on servicing EU business, mitigating Eurozone risk from London. The alternative is to impose capital collateral and liquidity charges on global financial institutions dealing with EU financial institutions, including their subsidiaries, which would make it prohibitively expensive for those EU financial institutions, leading either to EU customers bypassing those middlemen and dealing straight with London-based entities anyway, i.e. their efforts to try and split the market would fail, or prohibitive restrictions on and costs and restrictions on EU growth. Now, that's the financial services thing, which I think is leverage for a financial services deal, and tag along things like legal services, information exchange, data protection, and so on. The other point of leverage here is that the phenomenon, the setup I mentioned, means also that there is massive dumping of underpriced products from the Eurozone on the UK, US, and other markets, which the UK needs to be free to deal with after year end. And it happens in two ways. First, the euro is underpriced for the northern Eurozone countries structurally because of the fact that individual debts are at individual member state level, in the way I said, which pulls down the value of the euro for Germany, the Netherlands, and so on, meaning their prices are sales prices are too low or don't properly reflect what's going on in the UK market. Secondly, the Target 2 system provides unlimited subsidization to Eurozone sellers through a debit and credit system where the balances are never settled. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, the banking system is running itself without proper cost. All of these things are actionable unilaterally by the UK using self-help remedies under WTO law. They don't require going through any process or committee or judicial process at WTO to true up the prices to what they should be to protect the competitiveness of the UK market and UK producers competing unfairly through this system. We should do that, but obviously under a deal we'd do it more systematically, which would be a bonus to the EU. Finally, it explains why the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to fall away, amongst any other reason that Martin has mentioned, because the Northern Ireland Protocol and the EU state aid law, it doubles down on all of these fictions and would prevent the UK using its international law rights and entitlements under WTO law and otherwise to protect citizens and businesses in Northern Ireland and across the whole UK from the dumping and subsidisation that takes place through the Republic and Northern Eurozone.